A church in Atlanta, a Sunday evening service. But instead of a sermon, the pastor has asked the congregation to gather around a table at the front. On the table, 43 sealed envelopes. Each one contains the DNA ancestry results of a church member who submitted a kit 8 weeks ago. The pastor opens the first envelope, reads the name, calls Sister Johnson to the front. She is 74 years old. She has attended this church for 51 years. She has buried a husband and raised 6 children. She has never known where her family came from. Not the country, not the ethnic group, not the name. The pastor reads the results. Sister Johnson, your maternal lineage traces to the Amhara people of Ethiopia. Amhara, Ethiopia, the land of Cush, the son of Ham. Genesis 10:6. Sister Johnson does not speak. She does not need to. Her face says everything. Tears roll down cheeks that have smiled through 6 decades of American church life without knowing the name of the people who gave her those cheeks, that nose, that resilient faith. Amhara. Her people have a name, after 400 years. A name. This scene is not fiction. It is happening in black churches across America, in Houston and Charlotte and Chicago and Birmingham and Detroit. Pastors are organizing group DNA testing events, bulk purchases of ancestry kits, community reveal services, Heritage Sundays, where the congregation discovers together who they are and where they come from. And they do not know it. Most of them do not know it. But they are fulfilling a prophecy that Moses wrote 3,400 years ago. Deuteronomy 31. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. Call them to mind. Remember, among the nations where you were scattered, after the curse has come upon you, you shall remember. DNA technology did not exist when Moses wrote those words. Ancestry kits were not available at Walmart in 1400 BCE, but Moses said the scattered would remember. And in 2026, they are remembering. In churches, with envelopes, with tears, with names, Amhara, Oromo, Tigrinya, Mandinka, Yoruba, Mende, Fulani. Moses was right, and the proof is in your cells. Before I show you how precisely Deuteronomy 31 maps onto what is happening in these churches, let me explain how DNA testing actually works, because understanding the science deepens the prophecy. Your body contains approximately 37 trillion cells. Inside almost every one of those cells is a nucleus. Inside that nucleus is your DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, a molecular instruction manual that contains the complete blueprint for building you. And encoded in that blueprint is your history. Not just your personal history, your ancestral history. Thousands of years of migration, marriage, survival, and adaptation, written in a chemical code that the slave trade could not erase. There are 3 types of DNA testing relevant to ancestry. First, autosomal DNA. This is the most common type, the one you get from 23, and me, or ancestry DNA. Autosomal DNA comes from both parents. You inherit roughly 50% from your mother and 50% from your father. It gives you a breakdown of your ethnic composition across all ancestral lines. For example, 32% West African, 19% East African, 8% European, and so on. Autosomal DNA is powerful for broad ethnic percentages, but it has a limitation. It recombines with every generation. Your autosomal DNA represents the last 6 to 8 generations with precision, but beyond that, the signal becomes noisy. It tells you where your ancestors came from in approximate terms, but it struggles with specific ethnic identification beyond a few centuries. Second, mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. This is where it gets prophetically significant. Mitochondria are tiny energy-producing structures inside your cells. They have their own separate DNA. And here is the critical fact. Mitochondrial DNA is inherited exclusively from your mother. Your mother got it from her mother, who got it from her mother, in an unbroken chain reaching back thousands of years. Your mtDNA is virtually identical to your mother's, your grandmother's, your great-grandmother's, and so on, all the way back to Africa. The slave ships could not erase it. The plantation system could not overwrite it. Forced breeding could not dilute it. Your maternal lineage, the women who carried you forward through the Middle Passage, through slavery, through Jim Crow, is encoded in your mitochondrial DNA, unchanged, unbroken, intact. When an mtDNA test tells a Black American woman that her maternal haplogroup traces to the Amhara people of Ethiopia, it means that her mother's 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 mother, across 10, 20, 30 generations, was Amhara. The name was not lost. It was hidden in her cells, waiting for the technology that could read it. Third, Y-chromosome, DNA. This follows the paternal line, father to son, exclusively. Like mtDNA, Y-DNA is passed relatively unchanged across generations, creating a direct paternal lineage that can be traced back thousands of years. For Black American men, Y-DNA testing can reveal specific African patrilines, connecting them to Mandinka, Yoruba, Igbo, or Fulani paternal ancestors. Now here is why one company matters enormously. African Ancestry, founded by Dr. Rick Kittles and Gina Page, was specifically designed for people of the African diaspora. Unlike 23 and Me, or Ancestry DNA, which were built with primarily European reference databases, African Ancestry built its database using DNA samples from over 400 indigenous African ethnic groups. They did not ask, "What percentage African are you?" They asked, "Which African people are you?" That specificity, that naming, is what transforms a test from a curiosity into a prophetic act. When African Ancestry tells you that your maternal lineage matches the Mende people of Sierra Leone, or the Tigrinya people of Eritrea, or the Balanta people of Guinea-Bissau, it is not giving you a percentage. It is giving you a name, your people's name, the name the slave trade tried to erase, the name that survived in the double helix of your DNA for 400 years, waiting for someone to read it. And Moses said you would remember. Now let me take you inside the Hebrew. Because the English translation of Deuteronomy 31 is adequate, but the Hebrew is surgical. Deuteronomy 31. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. The Hebrew phrase translated, call them to mind, is vehashevota levavecha. And every word in this phrase carries specific theological weight. Vehashevota, from the root shuv, meaning to return, to turn back, to restore. But in the hyphal verbal form with the reflexive pronoun, vehashevota, it becomes, you shall cause yourself to return. Not, you will passively remember. You will actively cause a return to happen. This is not daydreaming about the past. This is an intentional, deliberate act of restoration. You will make yourself remember. You will pursue the knowledge. You will seek it out. A Black woman ordering a DNA ancestry kit online, swabbing her cheek, mailing it to a laboratory, waiting 8 weeks for results, and then opening an envelope to discover that she is Amhara. That is, vehashevota. That is causing herself to return. That is actively pursuing the knowledge that was stolen. That is fulfilling the Hebrew verb. levavecha, to your heart, not to your mind. The Hebrew word lev means heart, the center of emotion, identity, and will. The remembering is not intellectual, it is cardiac. It goes to the heart. It changes who you understand yourself to be. It is identity remembering, not fact recall. When Sister Johnson hears Amhara and tears roll down her face, that is levavecha. The name did not go to her mind. It went to her heart. She did not file it as information. She felt it as identity. The remembering was cardiac, exactly as the Hebrew predicts. Among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. Two devastating words. Driven thee. The Hebrew hidachaka from nadach, meaning to be pushed, expelled, driven out, not wandered to, not chose to go. Driven. The scattering was not voluntary. It was forced. God acknowledges in the text itself that the scattering was compulsory. The people did not choose to be among the nations. They were driven there. The transatlantic slave trade was a driving. 12 million Africans did not volunteer to cross the Atlantic. They were driven, in chains, in ships, against their will, by force. And Moses said that the driven ones, among the nations where they were scattered, would one day call their identity back to their hearts. Deuteronomy 32 continues, "And shalt return unto the Lord thy God, and shalt obey his voice, according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thine heart, and with all thy soul." The remembering leads to return. Not just emotional memory, but active, directional, purposeful return to God, to identity, to covenant. The DNA test is not the destination. It is the trigger for a return that Moses said would follow the remembering. Deuteronomy 33-4 completes the prophecy. "Then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee." The outmost parts of heaven, the most remote places on earth, the furthest corners of the globe. If you have been driven to the limit of human territory, God says, "Even from there I will gather you." No one is too far. No one is too lost. No one has been driven so deep into the nations that God cannot reach them, find them, and restore their identity. A Black American in Detroit, whose ancestors were taken from a village in Sierra Leone 350 years ago, driven to the outmost parts from their homeland, discovers through a DNA test that she is Mende. God gathered her identity from the outmost parts, through technology, through a swab, through a laboratory in a building that did not exist 30 years ago. But the prophecy existed 3,400 years ago. Moses saw the DNA test. He could not name it. He could not describe the technology. But he saw the function. He saw the scattered remembering. He saw the driven ones calling their identity back to their hearts. He saw it, and he wrote it down. In Hebrew, in Deuteronomy 30, in words that read like a 21st century laboratory report written by an ancient prophet. To understand why DNA testing is such a profound prophetic act, you have to understand what was taken. Because the slave trade did not merely steal labor, it stole identity. Systematically, deliberately, with precision that suggests strategic planning, not mere cruelty. When an African man or woman was captured and loaded onto a slave ship, the first thing that was taken was their name. Not just their personal name, their family name, their clan name, their ethnic name. the name that told them who their people were, where their village was, which river they grew up beside, which ancestors they honored. That name was deleted, replaced with a property designation, a number on a cargo manifest, and later, an English surname that belonged to the person who owned them. The second thing taken was language. African languages were suppressed on plantations. Speaking in your mother tongue was punished, sometimes by mutilation, sometimes by death. Within a generation, the language was lost. And with the language went the oral histories, the genealogies, the songs, the proverbs, the prayers, the stories that connected a person to 10,000 years of cultural continuity. The third thing taken was religion. The spiritual practices, the cosmologies, the rituals, the sacred texts of West and East African traditions were classified as heathen and forbidden. Christianity was imposed, but a weaponized Christianity, stripped of its liberation content. The spiritual infrastructure that connected a person to their ancestors, to their land, to their cosmological identity, erased. The fourth thing taken was genealogy, the family tree itself. Slave owners kept meticulous financial records, how much they paid for a person, how many pounds of cotton that person produced, how many children that person bore. But they kept zero genealogical records for the enslaved, no birth certificates, no family trees, no lineage documentation. When a person was sold, they were separated from every living relative, children from mothers, husbands from wives, siblings from siblings. The genealogical line was severed. The Slave Voyages database, slavevoyages.org, documents over 12 million Africans transported across the Atlantic between 1500 and 1866. It identifies the ports of departure: Ouida, Elmina, Luanda, Bonny, Calabar, Gore Island. Each port served a specific regional catchment. Ouida drew from the Fon and Yoruba peoples, Elmina from the Akan, Luanda from the Congo, and Mbundu. But while the database can tell us where the ships left from, it cannot tell us where the individuals on those ships ended up, or what happened to their descendants. The trail goes cold at the American auction block. The genealogical line is broken. For 400 years, the question, "Where do I come from?" was unanswerable for most Black Americans. 400 years. That is the Middle Passage Gap. 4 centuries of identity silence. 400 years of not knowing the name of the people who gave you your face, your build, your hair texture, your resistance to certain diseases, your musical instinct, your culinary DNA, your spiritual intensity. 400 years of, "I don't know where I come from." And DNA testing closes the gap. Not perfectly, not completely, but specifically enough to give you a name: Amhara, Mandinka, Yoruba, Mende, a name that was hidden in your cells, the one place the slave system could not reach, could not erase, could not overwrite. Moses said the driven ones would remember. 400 years later, the exact time span of Genesis 15:13, where God told Abraham, "Thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs." 400 years. The remembering is happening. The gap is closing. The names are returning. There are. Now here is where science meets Genesis. Because when your DNA ancestry results come back, they do not just tell you a modern ethnic group. They connect you to the biblical table of nations. Your cells carry a document that matches Genesis 10. Genesis 10:6, and the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Put, and Canaan. Ham had 4 sons. Each son became the patriarch of a civilization, a people group, a genetic lineage that persists to this day. And your DNA test is reading that lineage. If your DNA shows Ethiopian or East African heritage, Amhara Oromo, Tigrinya, Somali, you are a descendant of Cush, the firstborn son of Ham, the patriarch of the kingdom of Cush that ruled the Upper Nile for over 1,000 years. The dynasty that produced pharaohs, the people who built the pyramids of Meroe, the ancestor named in Ezekiel 38:5 alongside Persia in the greatest end times prophecy in the Bible. Cush lives in your cells. If your DNA shows Egyptian or North African markers, you carry the lineage of Mizraim, the second son of Ham, the patriarch of Egypt, the world's first superpower. 3,000 years of pyramids, hieroglyphs, medicine, mathematics, and governance. The nation that preserved the infant Jesus. The nation God himself calls my people in Isaiah 19:25. Mizraim is in your DNA. If your DNA shows Libyan, Berber, or Northwest African connections, you carry the lineage of Put, the third son of Ham, the patriarch of the Libyan peoples who populated North Africa from Tunisia to Morocco, the ancestor of Simon of Cyrene, the man who carried the cross of Jesus Christ. Put is in your chromosomes. Now, most Black Americans, the majority, show significant West African ancestry: Yoruba, Igbo, Mandinka, Akan, Mende, Wolof, Fulani. These peoples are not all directly mapped to a single son of Ham in Genesis 10, because the Table of Nations lists the patriarchs, not every subgroup, but the broader Hamitic genealogy, the descendants of Ham who populated the entire African continent, encompasses all of them. Genesis 10:19-20 says the descendants of Ham spread across a vast territory. The genetic evidence confirms it. The migration patterns from East Africa westward and southward across the continent over thousands of years created the extraordinary diversity of African peoples. Mandinka, Yoruba, Igbo, Mende. All of these groups trace their ultimate genetic origins to the East African homeland, where the sons of Ham first established their civilizations. So when your 23andMe results say 34% Nigerian, 22% Mali, 18% Cameroon, 12% Ethiopian, you are reading a biblical document. Your cells are reciting Genesis 10. Your DNA is a living, breathing table of nations that has been passed from parent to child, mother to daughter, father to son, for 3,500 years, through the Middle Passage, through slavery, through every attempt to erase who you are. And here is the most stunning detail. When a Black American discovers through DNA testing that they have both West African and East African ancestry, which many do, they are discovering that they carry multiple lines from the Table of Nations. They are connected to Cush and to the broader Hamitic migration. They are not from one place. They are from a family of nations. The sons of Ham were brothers, and their descendants, scattered across the African continent and then across the Atlantic, carry the DNA of that brotherhood in every cell. Your DNA test is not a consumer product. It is a scroll, a genetic scroll that unrolls the Table of Nations across your chromosomes and says, "You are the child of Ham, the grandson of Noah, the descendant of civilizations that built the ancient world. And the name that the slave trade tried to drown is written in ink that water cannot wash away." The DNA reveal movement in Black churches is not an isolated trend. It is a movement, and it is growing. Across America, pastors are recognizing that identity restoration is spiritual work. When a congregation discovers its ancestral roots together, something shifts. It is not just individual discovery, it is communal awakening. The remembering happens in community, which is exactly how Deuteronomy 30 frames it. "Thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations." The calling to mind is a collective act, a gathered people remembering together. Churches are purchasing DNA kits in bulk, 50, 60, 100 kits at a time, distributing them to members, and then gathering weeks later for a Heritage Sunday service. The pastor reads the results from the pulpit. The congregation witnesses each revelation. When Brother Williams discovers he is Mandinka, the entire church receives that knowledge. When Sister Davis discovers she is Tigrinya, the whole body celebrates. The remembering is not private. It is ecclesiastical. Henry Louis Gates, Jr., the Harvard professor who hosts Finding Your Roots on PBS, has been doing this on national television for years. Episode after episode, public figures, actors, musicians, athletes, politicians, educators, sit across from Dr. Gates and learn, often for the first time, where their African ancestors came from. The emotional responses are consistent: shock, tears, silence, joy, relief, and over the same phrase, "I always wanted to know." That hunger, the deep, persistent, lifelong need to know where you come from, is vehashevota, the active pursuit of remembering, the soul's demand for identity restoration. And the results are not abstract, they are actionable. When you discover you are Amhara, you can study the Amhara people. Their language, Amharic, a Semitic language related to Hebrew and Arabic, the liturgical and governmental language of Ethiopia for centuries. Their history, the Solomonic dynasty, the kingdom of Aksum, the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. Their cuisine, injera and wat, spiced lentils and slow-cooked meats on fermented flatbread. Their music, the pentatonic scales that echo in gospel and blues, carried across the ocean in the bodies of the stolen. When you discover you are Mandinka, you can study the Mandinka epic of Sundiata Keita, the warrior king who founded the Mali Empire in the 13th century. You can learn about the Jali tradition, the oral historians who memorized genealogies going back dozens of generations, an African version of the covenant record-keeping that Israel maintained. You can trace your paternal lineage through the same griot tradition that Alex Haley used to identify his ancestor, Kunta Kinte, in Roots. When you discover you are Yoruba, you can study the Yoruba kingdoms, Oyo, Ife, Benin, civilizations that produced bronze sculptures so sophisticated that European art historians initially refused to believe Africans had made them. You can learn the Yoruba cosmological system, understand how its philosophical depth influenced both African traditional religion and the development of diaspora spiritual practices across the Americas. The discovery is not the end. It is the beginning. The DNA test opens a door. Behind that door is a civilization, a language, a cuisine, a philosophy, a spiritual tradition, a family. Your family. The family the Middle Passage tried to separate you from forever. And the church, the Black Church, is the institution leading this restoration. Not the university, not the government, not the tech industry. The church, the place where the faith survived the slave Bible, the place where the spirituals were composed, the place where Martin Luther King Jr. organized the movement. The Black Church is now the institution through which Deuteronomy 31 is being fulfilled. In pews, with envelopes, with tears, with names. Deuteronomy 31 is not the only place in Scripture where God promises to keep records of identity. The Bible is filled with passages that declare God doesn't forget, God doesn't lose track. God records. Psalm 87, 4-6, one of the most overlooked prophecies in the Psalter. I will make mention of Rahab and Babylon to them that know me. Behold Philistia and Tyre, with Ethiopia. This man was born there. And of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her, and the Highest himself shall establish her. The Lord shall count, when he writeth up the people, that this man was born there. Selah. Read the last verse again. The Lord shall count, when he writeth up the people, that this man was born there. God is keeping a census. He is writing up the people. And in his record, he notes where each person was born, not where they were enslaved, not where they were sold, not where they landed, where they were born, the origin, the homeland, the starting point. When the slave trade erased your birth record, when the plantation said you were born property, born nowhere, born from nothing, God was writing a different record. His record says, this man was born there, in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, in Ghana, in Senegal, in the land of Cush, by the river, in the village, among the people. God recorded your birthplace, and he hid that record in your DNA. Psalm 87 specifically mentions Ethiopia, Cush, in its list of nations that God recognizes. God counts the Cushites among his registered people. They are not footnotes. They are counted, written up, recorded. And the record, according to Psalm 87, is kept by the Highest himself. Isaiah 49:15-16 takes it even further. Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Thy walls are continually before me. Graven upon the palms of my hands. Engraved, permanent, indelible, not written in pencil. Graven, the way a name is carved into stone, the way DNA is encoded in the double helix, permanently, structurally, at the molecular level. God says, even if a mother forgets her child, the most primal bond in nature, I will not forget you. Your identity is carved into my hands. Your walls, your boundaries, your heritage, your territorial identity are continually before me. I am always looking at who you are. I never stopped seeing you. The slave trade said, we will erase you. We will take your name, your language, your family, your religion, your land, and your history. We will make you a blank, a commodity, a number on a manifest. And God said, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Try to erase that. Jeremiah 29:14 completes the prophetic framework. And I will be found of you, saith the Lord. And I will turn away your captivity. And I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith the Lord. And I will bring you again into the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive. I will gather you from all the nations, from all the places where you were driven, and I will bring you back to the place from which you were taken. The DNA test is the first step of the gathering, not the final step, but the first step, the step where you discover the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive. The place has a name. Your DNA knows it. Jeremiah says God will bring you back to it. And when a black American, who has never set foot in Africa, discovers through DNA that she is Mandinka, and then travels to the Gambia, and walks through the village where her ancestors lived, and is received by Mandinka elders, who say, welcome home, daughter. That is Jeremiah 29:14 in the flesh. That is the gathering. That is the return. And it starts with a swab and an envelope. Now let me address the theological significance of what is happening, because this is not just a social trend. This is a case study in how God uses human technology to fulfill ancient prophecy. Moses wrote Deuteronomy 31, approximately 1400 BCE. He predicted that people scattered among the nations would call to mind their identity, actively, deliberately, with cardiac impact. He could not have known how this would happen. He could not have imagined DNA, double helixes, polymerase chain reaction, autosomal sequencing, mitochondrial haplogroups, or ancestry databases. None of those concepts existed. None of those words existed. The technology that makes the remembering possible was 3,400 years in the future. But Moses saw the function. He saw the result. He described the emotional and spiritual impact. Call them to mind in your heart. He described the prerequisite conditions, scattered among nations, driven out after the curse has come upon you. He described the outcome: return to God, restoration of covenant, gathering from the nations. Everything about the prophecy is specific. Only the mechanism was left unnamed, because the mechanism had not been invented yet. This is how God operates throughout Scripture. He reveals the what without always revealing the how. He told Abraham, "Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars," without explaining reproductive biology. He told Isaiah, "A virgin shall conceive," without explaining parthenogenesis. He told John, "The whole world will see the two witnesses" in Revelation 11, without explaining satellite television or the internet. God speaks the outcome. Technology eventually provides the mechanism. And when the mechanism arrives, the prophecy clicks into place like a key into a lock that was built for it. DNA sequencing is the technology God built to fulfill Deuteronomy 31. The Human Genome Project, completed in 2003, mapped the complete human genetic code. Direct-to-consumer ancestry testing, launched by 23 and Me in 2006, and Ancestry DNA in 2012, made genetic ancestry accessible to ordinary people. African ancestry, with its diaspora-specific database, made it precise for Black Americans. The timeline is extraordinary. For 3,400 years, Deuteronomy 31 was a promise waiting for a mechanism. For 400 years, the Middle Passage Gap created the conditions the prophecy described. People scattered, driven, disconnected from their origins. And in the same generation that the scattering is colliding with political suppression, the technology of remembering becomes commercially available for $69 and a cheek swab. The convergence is not coincidence. The convergence is design, and the implications are staggering. If DNA testing fulfills Deuteronomy 31, and the evidence says it does, then what other prophecies are being fulfilled by modern technology? If the printing press fulfilled the Great Commission's call to take the gospel to all nations, and if satellite television fulfilled Revelation 11's prediction that the whole world would see a prophetic event simultaneously, then technology is not secular. Technology is a prophetic tool. God does not limit himself to supernatural means. He uses human innovation as delivery vehicles for ancient promises. The scientist who sequences DNA in a laboratory does not know she is fulfilling Deuteronomy 31. The engineer who built the sequencing machine does not know he constructed a prophetic instrument. The UPS driver who delivers the ancestry kit to a church in Atlanta does not know he is carrying a scroll that connects a grandmother to her Amhara heritage. But God does. God has been waiting 3,400 years for the technology to catch up to the prophecy. And now it has. Your name survived the Middle Passage. It is in your cells right now. And Moses said you would find it. So here is what I need you to do. Take the test. If you have not taken a DNA ancestry test, order one today. African ancestry for the most precise African ethnic matching. 23andMe or Ancestry DNA for broadest coverage. The cost is between $60 and $300 depending on the test. That is less than a pair of sneakers. And the sneakers will not tell you who your mother's people were. The test will. Do it as a family. Order kits for your parents, your siblings, your children. Each person's DNA carries slightly different ancestral information, especially between maternal and paternal lines. The more family members test, the fuller the picture becomes. Your mother's mtDNA traces one lineage. Your father's Y-DNA traces another. Together, they map a fuller version of your Table of Nations scroll. Do it as a church. Talk to your pastor. Propose a Heritage Sunday. Buy 50 kits at bulk discount. Distribute them to the congregation. 8 weeks later, gather together and read the results from the pulpit. Let the remembering happen in community, as Deuteronomy 30 intended, among the gathered, not in isolation. After the test, learn your people. When the results arrive, do not put them in a drawer. Study them. If you are Amhara, learn Amharic phrases. Study the Solomonic dynasty. Watch documentaries about Lalibela. Cook injera. Listen to Ethiopian music. Hear the pentatonic scales that your grandmother hummed in a Baptist church in Georgia without knowing why those notes felt like home. If you are Mandinka, read the Sundiata epic. Learn about the Mali Empire, the richest kingdom in medieval history, where Mansa Musa's wealth was so staggering that his Hajj to Mecca crashed the Egyptian gold market for a decade. Discover the jolly tradition of oral history. Understand that your people had genealogists, professional record keepers, who memorized family lineages for dozens of generations, long before the slave trade severed the line. If you are Yoruba, study the Oyo Empire. Visit the Benin bronze collections. Learn about the Ifa divination system, one of the most sophisticated philosophical frameworks ever developed on any continent. Understand that your ancestors were not primitive. They were architects of civilizations. Visit. If you can afford it, go. Walk the land. Touch the soil. Stand where your ancestors stood. Let your feet remember what your name already knows. Ancestry tourism to Africa is not vacation. It is pilgrimage. It is Deuteronomy 30 in the flesh, returning to the place from which you were driven. Type your results in the comments right now. If you have already taken a DNA test, tell me what you discovered. Amhara, Mandinka, Yoruba, Igbo, Mende, Tigrinya? I want to see a table of nations in this comment section. I want to see Genesis 10 come alive with names. If you have not taken the test, type "I'm next" in the comments. Make it a public declaration. Let this comment section be a prophetic record of the moment you decided to fulfill Deuteronomy 31 in your own life. Share this video with every Black person you know who has ever said, "I wish I knew where I came from." Send them the link. Tell them. Moses said you would remember. The test costs $69, and the name is already in your cells. Subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon, because we go deep on every dimension of identity, prophecy, and the Black experience in Scripture. Every video on this channel is a Deuteronomy 31 moment, a calling to mind, an act of remembering, a return to the heart. Now let us close with a prayer, not a generic prayer, a naming prayer. A prayer that calls specific names before the throne of God. Father God, we come before you tonight with Deuteronomy 31 in our hands and DNA results on our screens. You said we would remember. You said we would call them to mind among the nations. You said that even from the outmost parts of heaven, you would find us, gather us, and bring us back. Tonight we remember. We remember the Amhara, the carriers of Gaius, the keepers of the Ark tradition, the people of the Ethiopian highlands who preserved the Book of Enoch when the rest of the world forgot it. If there is an Amhara descendant watching tonight, we see you. God sees you. Your name survived. We remember the Oromo, the Cushites of the Great Rift Valley, the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia, a people of pastoral wisdom and resilient faith. If there is an Oromo descendant watching tonight, your ancestors walked the same soil where Lucy's bones were found, the oldest human ancestor ever discovered. You are ancient, and your name survived. We remember the Mandinka, the people of the Mali Empire, the children of Sundiata, the community of griots who memorized genealogies when the Western world was illiterate. If there is a Mandinka descendant watching tonight, Kunta Kinte was your brother. Your name survived. We remember the Yoruba, builders of Ife and Oyo, sculptors of bronze that Europeans refused to believe Africans had made, philosophers of Ifa, who understood the universe's complexity before Western science had a vocabulary for it. If there is a Yoruba descendant watching tonight, your aesthetic excellence lives in every gospel choir robe, every church mural, every tradition of beauty and worship. Your name survived. We remember the Mende, the people of Sierra Leone, whose Sanda society empowered women in governance and education for centuries before any Western feminist movement. If there is a Mende descendant watching tonight, the strength of your grandmothers came from Mende soil. Your name survived. We remember every name. Tigrinya, Wolof, Fulani, Igbo, Akan, Hausa, Somali, Congo, Mbundu, Fon, Ewe, Balanta, Serer. Every name that was taken on the coast. Every name that was drowned in the Middle Passage. Every name that was overwritten on the plantation. Every name that God wrote into DNA and said, they will remember. Lord, you recorded us. Psalm 87 says you wrote our birthplace into your census. Isaiah 49 says, you graved us upon the palms of your hands. Jeremiah 29 says, you will gather us from every nation where we were driven. Tonight, the gathering begins. Not with ships, not with armies, with swabs and envelopes and tears and church pews and names spoken aloud for the first time in 400 years. Amhara, Oromo, Mandinka, Yoruba, Mende. We are calling them to mind, as you prophesied, as Moses wrote, as our cells have carried them. We are returning to our hearts, levavecha, to the heart, where identity lives, where belonging resides, where the name was hiding all along, in the name of the God who remembers, the God who counts, the God who writes up the people, the God who graves names on his palms, the God who gathers from the outmost parts. In the name of Jesus Christ, Jesus Christos, whose own life was saved by Africa. Amen. Your name survived the Middle Passage. It is in your cells. Moses said you would find it. And the technology is ready. The question is not whether Deuteronomy 31 is true. DNA has confirmed it. The question is, will you fulfill it? Will you call your name back to your heart? $69. One swab. One envelope. 400 years of silence. Broken. Moses was right.